right, I will say this, as I walk back there and look around at some of you guys' papers, it would be important. There's a reason we're going over these three on the warm-up. You're going to use these a lot. And we're not just going to use them a lot today. The next unit we'll use them. They're going to show up all the time, knowing the difference in these three. So if you didn't try anything, that was not a positive. If you did try something but you were confused, at least you tried something. But you're going to need to make sure that if you don't know how to do these three things, you got to spend some time making sure you can do them or you're making your life harder, okay? You're basically showing up to try to build a house and you have no tools, which is going to make it difficult. Would you agree with that, Dawson? Okay. So on midpoint. Now that should have in theory been the easiest one. Midpoint is the middle. What is another word for midpoint that I could write down here? Average. Anytime you're finding the midpoint, you're finding the average. Okay? Tony, what is the average of 1 and negative 3? Positive or negative? So 1 plus negative 3 would be, go with negative 2. Hey, when you're adding or subtracting negative numbers, think of money. If you had $1, you spent $3, you're $2 in the hole, aren't you? Positive and negative, when you're talking about adding and subtracting, works just like money. Positive is money that you're making or you're getting. Negative is what you're spending. So 1 plus negative 3 is negative 2. Divide by 2, you get negative 1. Negative 4 plus 0, obviously, is negative 4. Divide by 2, and you have the midpoint. So negative 1, negative 2 is the midpoint. Now, on distance, you could have graphed this point if you wanted to. You could use the distance formula. But if you're using the distance formula, what theorem is really the distance formula broken down? What theorem is the distance? Yes, ma'am? It's Pythagorean theorem. So write this down if you didn't do anything. And what I mean by that is when you're using the distance formula, when we tried to make it fancy, all the distance formula was changing the C to a D because you're finding distance. And since it's squared, they put this as a square root. And that's all they really did. They put the C first. Since it was squared, they put a big square root over that. That's how you're finding the distance. Now, it looked fancy because the way we find A is by subtracting what? The x's. So when you looked at that fancy distance formula, instead of having an A there, they have an x2 minus x1. That's all that means. So if we were looking up here, this is my x and that is my x, right? So if I was trying to plug that in, I would have negative 3 minus 1. And I would do the same thing for B, except that is subtracting the y's. That's where the y2 minus y1 came from in the distance formula. So my y's are 0 and negative 4. And now I've plugged that into and made that a distance formula problem. But all I'm really doing is Pythagorean theorem. Negative 3 minus 1 is negative 4. 0 minus negative 4 is positive 4. 16 plus 16. That would be my distance. So what I'm wanting you to remember, we could break that down, but I don't want to go over that right now. What I want to make sure you remember is this part right here. You guys with me? If you are trying to find the distance between 2 points, it is the Pythagorean theorem. You find the A by subtracting the what? The x's. And all you're really doing is finding how far it is from x1 to x2. That's all you're really doing. That's why when on the graph, you count. The B is just subtracting the y's. It's finding how far it is from y2 to y1. That's why on the graph, you count. And then you work it out. Now, as you notice, midpoint is a point, isn't it? Hence the word midpoint. Distance is a number because it's a distance. Slope is going to be a what? How do we write slope? Yep, it's a fraction, isn't it? It's rise over run. So slope will always be a fraction. And what gets confusing for people is this. When I looked over here, I'm going to do the same thing I did there, basically. You're trying to find how much the y changed, how much the x changed. So in this case, from 0 to -4 is -4, isn't it? From -3 to 1 is +4. Now, if you went the other way and made that positive and that negative, you're still getting the same answer. My slope is -1. Now, if you like, I just said it was going to be a fraction. You could think of that as -1 over 1 because it's still rise over run. Okay, is everybody good on those three things? Then once again, when you get to the practice, if you did not know how to do those are important. Spend some time making sure you can find midpoint. You can find distance, and you can find slope. Because the reason that we're going to use it on this one is we are doing mid-segment. All right? So I'm going to give you guys a few moments here to do this. On number 1, there's an A, B, and a C part. You have to find the midpoints and then connect them. I want you to do that.